Let me first respond to a few remarks that have been made by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. One of them, he complained, why is it that there has been no cause causée on this bill? And when I have listened to him today, not only on this bill, I must say we disagree on quite a number of things. But more so, with regard to this bill, because we have, and I, on behalf of government, we had held a press conference. We had made public our proposals. We have sent a document to each party represented in this House and to independent members also. And we expected at least to have, whether you call it constructive or whatever, but we expected to have counter proposals. There have been, as you rightly pointed out, maybe if I heard you correctly, some organizations, in fact, political parties also not in this House, individuals also, and even organizations which are not actively engaged in politics, which have made several proposals. And I think in my speech, I mentioned that a number of those who have made proposals, but which were not obviously acceptable because they were so, I would say, it was the gap between what we were proposing and what they were saying was so wide that it was difficult to engage any meaningful discussion. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition, I have been following what he's been saying publicly in a number of press conferences or elsewhere. And again, listening to him today has confirmed your stand. If I can understand you correctly, the root, apart you talk about meritocracy, institutions and so on, but the other root of the problem for you is the delimitation of the electoral boundaries. And you've come very hard against the Electoral Boundaries Commission. So where's the room for us to talk? I'm ready to talk. I said we are ready, we are open to any discussion. But again, the difference is so fundamental that I don't think that it would be meaningful even to start any discussion. And then, you know, you're talking about when the patient is sick. You know, this patient has been to, you know how many clinics? There has been this Select Committee report of 2004, the Carcassonne report of 2011, the Sitanen report of 2012, of which you form part of the government. Now, I hope you're not going to tell us that you were not the Prime Minister, therefore you had nothing to say. Consultation paper, you were not in that, on the electoral reform, I believe, in 2014. And then the electoral reform proposals of the Labour Party and the MMM. This has been on the agenda for years and years, Madam Speaker. We've been discussing, and sometimes when, you know, foreigners look at us here, they are also amazed because today we are in alliance with the mouvement libérateur. We have been, as far as the MSM is concerned, with the MMM, with the Labour Party, with the PMSD. I mean, who has not been with each other here in this very house? And discussing, and one of these issues has been, obviously, electoral reform. We have disagreements, yes, we have had. But we can't go on like this. We can't be, and that is why I'm going to respond to what has been suggested both by the MMM and the Mouvement Patriotique also. We refer the matter to a select committee, Madam Speaker. It's as if we are saying, let's continue to go round and round and round and round. It's as if the dog, you have suggested? No? Select committee?
After the election.
After the election, okay. But okay, Mouvement Patriotique then. But even after election, even after the election, because all the elements are here, we all do, you know, I can say that chapeau to Dr. Ramasitanen. He has been working so much on this that he made a thesis out of it and he became doctor in this field also. And I think the way we are going here, I'm not claiming for myself, I'm far from going to become a doctor, but some of us here will become doctors in electoral reform. We are going to make specialists of electoral reform in this country. This is what we are going to produce. You know? So we have the must, and that is why we came. We came with this bill. I am sad also. You are sad also. I am sad also that we are in such a situation. But we can't. No, never. But we have to do something concrete. We can't just keep on talking, discussing, trying to agree. I think this is the time that we have to each one assume our responsibility. Leader of the opposition is saying that, well, you put it in your manifesto. Yes. Let me remind him what we put also. You should, for fairness, you should mention everything that we put in our manifesto. When we say in the program, we said in our program, we said our electoral system will be reformed to introduce a dose of proportional representation in the National Assembly and guarantee better women representation. And anti-defection legislation will be introduced to make it more difficult for MNAs to cross the floor. A Financing of Political Parties Act will be enacted. Now, I agree. In our manifesto, we said the BLS will not be abolished. But, Madam Speaker, when we are faced with a situation where, on the one hand, the United Nations Human Rights Committee has made a pronouncement which says what it says. There's no need for me to go into the detail of it. And one of the fundamental issue where I think we all agree when we read the pronouncement is that we can't keep on with a mechanism of nominating best losers on the basis of the 1972, I believe, census. This is outdated, and government therefore has to take a stand. The pronouncement doesn't tell us what we have to do, but there is this observation. And we here, on this side, and the MMM also is, and I heard also the Mouvement Patriotique, that we do not agree, and I heard also the leader of the Labour Party, Dr. Navin Rambulam, also mentioned that we do not agree for a census. Therefore, what do we do? And then we also have the case of Résistance et Alternative before the Supreme Court of Mauritius, where they're contesting the fact that they should be allowed, whenever they want to stand as a candidate, not to be obliged to declare their community. What do we do? Because I say I have put it in my manifesto and I will come to the court, or I will go to the United Nations Human Rights Commission and say, look, I have put it in my manifesto. This, therefore, I stay put, I don't do anything. We have to act responsibly. And we have to act. Now, this is why, Madam Speaker, I say it was a truly historic opportunity. In fact, to mark a turning point in the political history of Mauritius. As I say, we have to choose between, we say modernization as opposed to stagnation. Okay, you don't agree. Fair enough. But our electoral system is old, very old. 50 years after independence. We had to reimagine the electoral architecture. And this is why we have come before this House with proposals for a modern electoral system. As I say, honorable members, I have listened attentively to all speeches. I would like to thank everybody. Doesn't mean to say that when we disagree, that I listen carefully, I try to understand each member's arguments. But, as I say, probably we had taken a too hopeful view of the situation. But even though I have appreciated the solid and substantial arguments that have been put forward by some honorable members, I must also say that the debate has been clouded by some members who are resisting change just for the sake of resisting, or maybe also due to short-sightedness. And I was very disappointed to hear the speeches of a few members with really heavy communal undertones. I must say I didn't believe that I would hear that kind of argument. I believe that such arguments, such kind of speeches is fit maybe for another age, but certainly not 2018. The type of rhetoric they are using, which targets a specific sentiment, is not fit for our country in this 21st century. In fact, it can do a lot of damage to nation building. Therefore, we are convinced that unfortunately some of the members are out of tune, but the country, especially the younger generation, they have new expectations and they are ready for the change we are proposing. I said I was too optimistic in believing that the political class as well was ready for change. I was wrong. Some of them are still not out of the communal swamp. As for the Labour Party, well, I actually have no surprise at hearing what the leader of the parliamentary group said. I think you are fighting a losing battle. You are defending outdated ideas which are bound to die one day or the other. And as I said, there are expectations in this country. And we all have to understand this. The Constitution, Madam Speaker, according to me, one day or another will have to eliminate the reference or any reference to ethnic or religious groups. It will happen. Might not happen now, I don't know when, but it will happen. And those who resort to communal tactics to counter our proposals are getting lost in the source of politicking. As I say, we have a historic opportunity for change, and I would call some of the rabble-rousers in this House have chosen to fan the flames of communal tension. This is more dangerous than mere political opportunism. And I don't know how I would not be able to try to exploit religion and ethnicity for short-term gains. I say this is not, at least this is not my style. But we shall cling to our political beliefs, whatever be the consequences. And I must say that some members have also missed the point, or maybe deliberately distorting or diverting the debate. There have been some incorrect statements, and it was therefore necessary for us to debunk the falsehood that they have been spreading and clarify certain misinterpretation. Now, on this side of the House, we have given a fitting rebuttal to a number of their arguments. Nevertheless, I would like, on my part, to take a few arguments which have come from the other side. Let me again take the suggestion that was made by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and other members of the PMSD to reinstate the communal census. Again, Madam Speaker, I will say emphatically no. I will say in the most unequivocal terms that I shall never support the inclusion of a question on ethnic categories in a census for electoral purposes. We are talking about two different things when you mention about the census that was carried out. I consider it to be retrograde, and it will be detrimental to nation building. A census that asks Mauritians to classify themselves by community and ethnicity is improper. It is, in fact, contrary to our values. We, on this side of the House, we stand for a secular and modern nation. And to those who may be too young to fully understand the dangers of fragmenting our nation, to those who are not aware of the true Mauritian spirit, and to those who are obsessed with partisan considerations, I shall say, please have some respect for our nation. And I shall urge them to stop to try to divide the people further. I say to divide the people further. The ethnic census that the PMSD is calling for has chilling implications. The argument that an ethnic census will be useful for social reengineering is simply untenable. As I say, there is no need to continue to compartmentalize our population. And we try to do that when I heard the leader of the opposition saying to try to fight poverty and social exclusion. There are more effective ways, there are other ways, more appropriate for achieving this goal. And this is what precisely this government has been doing since we came to power. And we must also not underestimate the practical difficulties, I would say, associated with such an exercise. Because, Leader of the Opposition, you must understand one thing. You're talking about carrying out a census for the purposes of having updated figures with regard to the 4 communities mentioned in our Constitution, so as for the best loser to be nominated on the latest figures. What 4 communities do we have? What 4 communities do we have mentioned in the Constitution? And if somebody in the census says, I am a Mauritian, what do? The Honorable Leader of the Opposition mentioned that out of the household budget survey that was carried out, no? Population census that was carried out, people, yes, and the me and the you, whoever, it doesn't matter. I am saying there is a fundamental difference between that census and this one that you want to carry out for electoral purposes. There is. Somebody will answer. I just take a few examples of, this is Mauritius, Madam Speaker. Somebody who is of one community married to another community and has a child. I don't know which community would we say the child would be born. Huh? General population. Madam Speaker, I am very serious about what I'm saying. You know? In fact,
Leader of Opposition, please. Nobody disturbed you when you were speaking. You can't place a name on anybody. Nicknames are not allowed.
Let me make my point. So, Madam Speaker, I was saying, Leader of the Opposition said, well, in the population census, out of so many people who have answered the question, let's say there's what? You mentioned 1,000, let's say even 100. Who is going to decide for those who have answered that I am a Mauritian, I am Assemblée des Dieux, I am Porte-Cotis, I am whatever it is? Who is going to classify them in what category? Who will have this power? You are going to give that to the Electoral Supervisory Commission? Because they are the one who makes the calculation for the best loser. Oh, Madam Speaker, therefore, it's going to be
no cross-talking. Leader of Opposition, you can see you are disturbing the Honourable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, Honourable Rupan asked me a question. Why don't you hear?
But if he does, then I would ask Honourable Rupan not to engage in any cross-talking, especially out of respect for the Honourable Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, therefore we must also be wary of the unintended consequences of reintroducing ethnic census. Mauritius is a young, small, complex and plural society. An ethnic census will only rekindle ethnic and religious debate and create rifts within the population. This is why I believe the majority of the population, especially the youth, rejects this type of census. And it is not surprising, I must say, that there is only one party, because I have heard all the others speaking against the census, the PMSD, in favor of this aberrant and anachronistic practice. I must say, admittedly, because the Leader of the Opposition mentioned that some countries are still resorting to ethnic census. But that does not mean that we should emulate them. Not only the questions about ethnic categories are objectionable in principle, but they will be highly artificial. And does it make sense to ask these questions to citizens who have broken down walls and developed a strong sense of Mauritianism? Instead, I would say, of going backwards, we need to strengthen the identity and sense of belonging of the nation. There is no necessity in the modern age to force people to identify themselves as belonging to one group or another. We belong to the nation, not to a community, not to a caste, not to a race. Our vision is to promote nationhood while making our unique cultural diversity a source of strength. And we shall safeguard and encourage pluralism within our society. But we shall avoid and reject and resist at all costs this proposal for ethnic census. Madam Speaker, on the issue of the review of the electoral boundaries, which was raised continuously, systematically has been raised in this House and outside by the leader of the opposition and members of his party. The House will appreciate that under the Constitution, it is the Electoral Boundaries Commission which bears the responsibility to carry out this review. And this task is not within the province of the executive. And as this House is aware, the Commission has already embarked on the review of electoral boundaries for its next report, which is due in 2019. The last report of the Commission was submitted in 2009, but was set aside by the then Prime Minister. In fact, the report was never presented to the National Assembly for reasons, in fact, which are best known to the Labour and the PMSD government at that time. And I heard something which is really, I would say, enfantin, coming from the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. He said, I was not Prime Minister. Navin Ramgoolam was Prime Minister. He was Deputy Prime Minister. You were not, but you were a senior minister in government. Yes. But when you were a senior minister in government, Madam Speaker, and you are thinking for such a long time about the problem of constituency delimitation, about boundaries, about the number of people, electors in one constituency and the other. And when this happens, the Prime Minister then, in your government, doesn't do anything, keep on sitting. I wouldn't say something else. But you don't even say anything. You don't say, look, this is something which is fundamental to the PMSD. We want something to be done. And not only about the report, forget about the report, but so many years you've been in previous governments. But what have you been saying? What have you done? It is now that you are wiser. Therefore, let me say that I would express my disappointment and resentment. And I must say that they are unwarranted criticisms made publicly against the members of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. The members of the Commission, to me, they have been doing their job with the highest degree of professionalism and integrity, which has been acknowledged, in fact, both nationally and internationally. I am not an expert in history, but I have tried to gather information, tried to understand why is it that our boundaries have been like that. I mean, Honourable Béranger has spoken about it, Honourable Ganou has spoken on this issue. I don't need to allude further. There is a context. There is a reason why it has been designed in such a way. And therefore we must be very careful. And that is why I completely disagree with the remarks that you made, which I consider really deplorable against such an institution, Madam Speaker. I also heard some members criticizing the proposed increase in the number of MNAs, which they say will be too high compared to some other countries. Well, as I have stated in my speech on Friday, the number of MNAs as we are proposing is, in fact, I'm not comparing with other countries. I'm just comparing with what all of us here, one way or the other, we have been proposed, the previous proposals that have been made. The increase in the number of MNAs, to me, it has to be increased, because this is the price that we have to pay to move towards a more inclusive, participatory, and representative decision making. Let me say, in its submission to the Sachs Commission, the Labour Party had proposed then 95 MNAs. The MMM had proposed 90 MNAs to the Sachs Commission. The Sachs Commission Model C recommended 100 MNAs. The Select Committee on PR also recommended 100 MNAs. Sitanen's report, 2012, 82 MNAs. And the last Labour MMM Alliance, 83 MNAs. We are proposing 81 MNAs, a number which, of course, in very exceptional circumstances, may go up to 85. So with this formula we are proposing, the losing party may get more PR seats than the winning party. Let me give an example where the losing party gets 57% of the votes against 43% for the winning party. It nearly happened in 1983, where the first party got 37 first past the post seats with 43% of eligible votes, against the second and third parties, which got a total of 23 seats with 57% of votes. It is also false to state, Madam Speaker, that with government's proposals, the majority between the first past the post winner and the first past the post loser will become wider. This is misleading, as the whole mechanism is aimed at ensuring at all times that the majority arising out of the first past the post results remains exactly the same after allocation of PR and additional seats. And it is also significant to note that under the formula we are proposing, in fact, the losing party will be compensated by the allocation of additional seats in case it receives less PR seats than the winning party. Now, let me give a few examples. In 1982 and 1995, where the results were 60-0, the losing parties got only 4 best loser seats. Under the proposed system, the losing parties would have received 9 seats, that is free PR plus 6 additional seats. The second example is the 1991 general elections, where the results were 57 free and the losing parties had got only 4 best loser seats. Under our formula, they would have received 9 seats. That is 5 PR plus 4 additional seats. The third example is 2000, 2010 and 2014 general elections, where the losing parties would have received 4 additional seats against 2 for the winning parties. Madam Speaker, let me now come to the best loser system. This has been, I must say, the central part of debate. Some honorable members are still in favor of maintaining the best loser system as it is, that is, with the concomitant mandatory declaration of community by prospective candidates. Let me quote what Professor De Smith, the Constitutional Commissioner, had to say in his November 1964 report about any form of communal representation. And I quote, "Some of the proponents of communal representation sought to show that this would discourage communalism and strengthen tendencies to vote along party lines. Others considered that it would encourage communalism, but asserted that communalism was in any event an ineluctable fact of life in Mauritius. My own belief is that the immediate effect of the introduction of communal representation in any form would be to intensify communalism by endowing it with the accolade of legitimacy, that candidates in an electoral campaign would experience irresistible temptations to appeal to the narrower communal prejudices, that there would be increasing demands for communal representation in other walks of private life, and that the long-term effects would be deleterious both to the minorities which now think of it as a safeguard and to the general welfare of the island, unquote. Madam Speaker, it is significant to note that the Law Reform Commission of Mauritius had, in a report released in May 2014, expressed its agreement with the views of Professor De Smith, and also stated that the system of communal representation is contrary to human dignity and is inimical to the rule of law. The Law Reform Commission was of the view that one of the main objectives of electoral reform should be, and I quote, the elimination of communal representation whilst ensuring representation of diversity of electorate. This objective can be attained through introduction of some form of proportional representation in our electoral system whilst maintaining the current first-past-the-post system, unquote. I must say also the Commission was in favor of a closed rank-based PR list as it is in line with international best practice. And Madam Speaker, this is the most important part. The Commission stated in its report that, and I quote, it shall be the responsibility of political parties to ensure that candidates on the PR list and for constituencies represent the diversity of the electorate, unquote. Madam Speaker, let me also remind the House what Honorable Béranger had to say on the best loser system in this House in 2014, and I quote, I take it today there is near unanimity que le best loser system est dépassé. I do not think it would be very helpful to try and work out at what point in our history, at what point in time it became dépassé. It is dépassé. There is near unanimity that the best loser system is dépassé, must be replaced by something that reassures everybody, that takes care of what has been there in the mind of certain people since 1948, but that does away with the obligation for people to declare their community when they stand as candidates, and for a communal electoral system as exists until today, Mr. Speaker, sir, unquote. Madam Speaker, let me also remind the House, and in particular the younger members of the PMSD, of what Sir Gaëtan Duval, then leader of the PMSD, said in this House in 1982 on the best loser system. And I quote, je ne crois pas qu'il faille aller à un référendum, etc., pour abolir le best loser system. Je crois qu'il est nécessaire, une fois pour toutes, d'en finir avec et de le remplacer par une sorte de représentation proportionnelle. Je crois que peut-être cette clause constitutionnelle peut perpétuer le communalisme dans nos institutions. Et j'avais dit à cette époque que tôt ou tard, this is important, Madame Speaker, tôt ou tard, il faudrait nous défaire de cette clause constitutionnelle. Je demande au gouvernement qu'il n'ait pas de scrupule, aucun scrupule, à venir abolir le best loser system. Et maintenant, il semble que la majorité, que l'unanimité même de l'Assemblée se fasse autour de l'Assemblée du best de l'abolition du best loser system, mais en le remplaçant par une sorte de représentation proportionnelle. Unquote. Now, it is important, Madam Speaker, to quote different judgments also in connection with this issue. In ex parte Electoral Supervisory Commission in 1991, the Supreme Court questioned whether a fair and adequate representation may be guaranteed through the best loser system when it is based on outdated census figures. The court considered that this was a problem for the legislator to solve. Rightly so. Other court judgments later on also reiterated that this issue should better be resolved politically rather than through the court. And in Karim Khan versus Liu Chin and others in 2000, Judge Sital Singh, in his judgment, observed that it is difficult for a judge in the Supreme Court to determine whether somebody belongs to a particular community just by looking at his way of life. Besides, one may change his way of life from one election to another. And let me quote what the judge had said in his concluding remarks. I quote, "It has not been possible for me to look objectively at the way of life of the respondents to determine their community. I have to confess that our Constitution is lacking in those respects, and that this has to be remedied." We understand, then we understand that a project of electoral reform is on the cards and hope that these defects would be remedied in the near future, unquote. So the Supreme Court, Madam Speaker, was expecting this matter to be addressed in the project of electoral reform, which was supposed to be in the pipeline, but which we all knew never materialized. Now, all candidates in a general election are required to declare their community on their nomination form. And if they don't do so, their papers are invalidated by the Electoral Commissioner. In Naren, it has been cited, but it's good that I cite it again. In Naren and others versus Electoral Commissioner and others, 2005, the court held that the provision in paragraph 5 of Regulation 12 of the National Assembly Elections Regulations 1968 is, to the extent that it purports to provide that the nomination of a candidate in view of a general election shall be deemed to be void and of no effect if he has not made a declaration in compliance with paragraph 4C of that regulation and is repugnant to section 1 of the Constitution and has been invalidly enacted. The Honorable Judge also expressed regrets that the electoral reform announced since long had not materialized. In the case of Electoral Supervisory Commission versus the Honorable Attorney General 2005, as a sequel of the previous one, the full bench of the Supreme Court highlighted the problems inherent in our best loser system, namely the consecration of communal consideration in constitutional terms, the difficulty of the court in determining the way of life of members of the Hindu, Muslim, and Sino-Mauritian communities, the fair and adequate representation of communities which is unrealistically based on the 1972 official census. And the Supreme Court again observed that these problems, Madam Speaker, this again is what the Supreme Court, what our courts has repeatedly been saying. These problems could only be solved by the legislator and not by the judiciary. And likewise, in the case of Dani Sylvie Marie and Dojaven Venkatasamy and others versus Electoral Commissioner, 2011, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council observed that, and I quote, "It would be much better for these issues to be decided as a result of political debates, and if necessary, constitutional reform than through the court, unquote. The judgment further stated that if these issues cannot be resolved politically, they may be raised before the Judicial Committee in the future. We don't know what is going to happen, what can happen in the future. But again, all these are the very reasons why we have come before this House. Because all the courts of law have been telling us it has to be resolved politically. It has to come through constitutional reform. Now, as highlighted by several members on this side of the House, Mauritius, as a party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, has been enjoined by the United Nations Human Rights Committee to consider whether the community-based electoral system is still necessary and avoid similar violations in the future. Madam Speaker, as hinted by a few members, apart from the best loser system, our electoral system already contains several special features to guarantee the political representation of all main segments of the population. It is important to note that experts agree that the best loser system has a very limited contribution in ensuring inclusiveness. And as a matter of fact, over the 10 general elections held between 1967 and 2010, 82% of the MNAs of one particular ethnic group entered parliament through the normal first past the post. For another ethnic group, the figure is 78%. And for a third community, the number is a remarkable 100%. I don't need to mention which community group. Besides, in the model we are proposing, party leaders will most certainly provide for broad-based and inclusive representation in their party list and in the designation of additional seats. And obviously it stands to reason that leaders, while submitting their PR list, will field candidates who are likely to correct any apprehended underrepresentation. And let me speak for my part. Should this bill be enacted, Madam Speaker, I say I undertake, I give a commitment as leader of this alliance to put on our PR list, and in order of priority, communities which are normally likely to be underrepresented after the first past the post result. And I take another commitment that in the discretion to allocate additional seats to correct any further imbalance should it be necessary. And here I would say our system, what we have proposed, is in fact more, how do I describe it, is more flexible than what has been proposed by the Labour MMM alliance. I'm not talking about the mode of PR representation. That is another debate. We agree to disagree, yes. But when Honorable Béranger said that our proposal was for a list to be submitted to the Electoral Supervisory Commission of 6 members at latest on nomination day, our system, you can choose from those unwritten candidates on the first past the post election and those who are on the PR list who have not been written as PR candidate. Therefore, the choice is wider, and the possibility of making any correction in terms of, I won't say only communal imbalance in terms of our constitution. I would even go further in terms of ethnic imbalance also that can arise. And I don't want to go into the details of it. I think we are all so much accustomed with this situation. Let me quote Honorable Béranger, what he said in the 2014 debate here. I quote, and this is very important. It was quoted by Honorable Rupan, but it's good that I repeat again. It took us a long time. And as I said, it is not ideal. What we have worked out finally is that the 8 best losers will be replaced by a system where the parties submit on nomination day a list of candidates in alphabetical order. And the leaders of the parties registered with the Electoral Commission will appoint from this list using their wisdom, their knowledge of Mauritius, the results of the elections, and this is a guarantee because we can't take it for granted that all political leaders are fools. No, there are people who genuinely care for national unity, for the progress of this country, and this mechanism a rassuré tous ceux qui étaient inquiets qu'on peut dépasser le best loser system, tout en rassurant ceux qui étaient inquiets. Mr. Speaker, sir, a big breakthrough. That was a big breakthrough. And I am proud, that this is marvelous, I would say. And I am proud that it was my doing. And then the Honorable Prime Minister came along and we have all moved together, Mr. Speaker, sir. Unquote. Yes, yes. Congratulations. But I say I cannot agree more with you, Honorable Béranger, on this. In fact, as I said, in fact, the formula that we are proposing, with regard to this aspect, I'm saying, because I don't want to be demagogical, with regard to this aspect, will do better in ensuring a fair and adequate representation of all the different components of our society. Given again the flexibility that the leaders will now have. Now, I can't resist, Madam Speaker, I have to say this. Honorable Béranger and Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, they were in alliance, they agreed, and I think they came up with this in the political agreement for the alliance. And obviously, included was this issue of the discretion given to the leaders, the leader, let's say, of the alliance to choose from that list. Now, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, in the meantime, at a political rally in Katobon, he comes and says, well, I never agreed to that. But, Madam Speaker, this is where people lose faith in politicians. When we have agreed to some, as I say, well, at that time he might have agreed for political interests, let's say. But at least come forward and say, look, well, this is what I agreed previously, but now I've changed my mind and I do not agree to give that power, that discretion to the leader to choose. And then he keeps on saying, oh, I don't want to go into what he has mentioned again. Let me come now with regard to gender representation. And again, I would like to mention that the Law Reform Commission was of the view that there is a need to correct the underrepresentation of women and considered that the major responsibility for that rests with the parties. Madam Speaker, with regard to representation of women, let me emphasize that paragraph 3 of the schedule provides that every party shall ensure that not more than 2/3 of its total number of candidates should be of the same sex. And this means that it is open to a political party to field up to 2/3 of women. So it is not limited to 30%. I hope I have not misunderstood Honorable Mohamed when he said that, why is it, I think he said, why is it that we are limiting it? It's not limited, it's the minimum, but then obviously any party can go beyond that. And I don't say this just to rebut to what Honorable Leader of the Opposition has said, but as far as I can remember, I have been in government now with 4 years with my friend Honorable Colin Davilou. I know his pensées avant-gardistes And I've never heard him saying that, why is it we are giving 1/3 quote as a minimum for women. As I can recollect in all discussions pertaining to other issues, he has always been forthcoming with regard to the advancement of the cause of women. So in fact, I congratulate him for that. Yeah. Now, Honorable Mohammed said that it took us 4 years to come up with our electoral reform proposals, and that was the same was couched in a few pages. Well, let me remind him, although he didn't come with a reform as such, but the Labour Party MMM electoral reform proposals were laid down on a single page, not even, you know, and they had the, I would say, the most brilliant, the most competent experts on electoral reform. They came up, Madam Speaker, look at that. This is what they came up with, electoral reform. And again, if I have to go through that, although it doesn't say, it is practically what we are proposing today, except I agree when Honorable Balamudi and Rezautim made the point that the mode of nominating the PR candidates, well, here we have a difference in the way that they should be nominated. Madam Speaker, in regard to adequate representation, again, Honorable Balamudi said that where is it written that in the bill that each and every component of our rainbow nation will be guaranteed to be represented in this assembly? I don't know. I would have expected Honorable Balamudi to come up and tell us how it would have been guaranteed, again, in this proposal, the same way that Honorable Béranger spoke about, the rainbow nation will be adequately represented in the assembly. I think this is not, I would say this is not fair, because Honorable Béranger has given you the answer. He said, look, leaders, what we have been doing all this time, all the leaders, in fact, all the leaders of the main parties, when we choose candidates, how do we choose candidates? We know we are guided by certain reality, a certain reality of the constituency, and also on the rainbow nation. We see to it that we have every representation in our party. This is how we fill candidates. This is how, when also we nominate, you're talking about, I won't go into that debate. I find this very unhealthy, to go into the debate of, you know, the percentage of such community and why is it that in cabinet. Again, you've discovered that only today. You have been in so many cabinets. I don't know why is it that you have never come out publicly to say, well, why is it that I am in a cabinet? As long as you are in a cabinet, it was okay, it was good. When you are not in the cabinet, then percentage-wise, this and that, you should, no, I tell you, look, I'm not perfect, but you have to be fair, you know. So it should not be, Honorable Balamudi, I was replying to you, it should not be that because you have made the point, yes, you have criticized, but the answer, the Honorable Leader of the Honorable Béranger has given you that answer. And this is what we do. This is what we have to assume our responsibility. I have said earlier, it is obvious, Madam Speaker, as far as I'm concerned, and as Béranger, Honorable Béranger has said in 2014, he said it, and I'm sure he will also look into it. Whenever let's say, if this bill is enacted, I'm sure on the PR list, who are we going to put topmost priority? Who are we going to put? We know we have a list of all the best losers who have been nominated for the past years. How many of them? From which community? And this is what we will do. And again, I emphasize on the advantage of our system, our proposal, is that when we are going to choose from the additional seats, the discretion that is given to a leader of the alliance or the party, obviously he will use it in the same way in order to compensate for underrepresentation. Madam Speaker, let me also clarify one issue which was raised on anti-defection measures. It was Honorable Abbas Mahmoud who said, pourquoi le gouvernement n'est pas allé jusqu'au bout du problème du transfugisme? Well, let me point out, first of all, that the anti-defection provisions proposed in the bill apply only to members who are allocated a PR or an additional seat. In reason to the regard why the anti-defection provisions are not being extended to members elected under the first past the post, let me explain that such measures may give rise to complex issues. We have looked into it. We have gathered especially the legal arguments, whether it would be in favor or against. Why we cannot probably disqualify an elected member on the ground that defection, because it can contravene Section 1 of the Constitution. This issue, Madam Speaker, will depend on the interpretation which the Supreme Court will give to the word democracy in Section 1 of our Constitution. In other words, the issue will depend on whether democracy will be interpreted as one where elected representatives are able to vote according to their conscience, or one where elected representatives have to vote along party lines. The Supreme Court of Mauritius has so far, obviously, not pronounced itself on this issue. The courts of different countries, however, have adopted different positions with respect to the constitutionality of anti-defection provisions. Let me say, in India, South Africa, the courts have upheld the constitutional validity of anti-defection measures. And such measures were held to be unconstitutional in Papua New Guinea, where the Constitutional Court refused to accept that the representative system imported from the Westminster model allowed defection measures. The court held that an MP's right to vote on a proposed law was amongst the most fundamental of his or her duties, and there was no authority to deny the performance of that duty under any circumstances. The right to vote had to be a real exercise of legislative power and not one that was predetermined by decisions made and instructions issued outside of the parliamentary chamber. In fact, most Western democracies, like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy, do not have legislation controlling crossing of the flow. Nor does Australia. The only attempt at control is through conditions in the party's constitution. And those countries that do not have legislation to control defection, that do have, legislation to control defection are India, South Africa, Fiji, Namibia, Papua New Guinea, Trinidad and Tobago, Vanuatu, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And so far, experiences in these jurisdictions have revealed, in fact, many of the difficulties associated with anti-defection legislation. And they have suggested that such laws are problematic at best and unworkable at worst. In India, for example, after an anti-defection law was introduced, more defections occurred each year, on average, than occurred before. The fact that a Commonwealth Constitution is a Westminster export constitution does not automatically mean that flow crossing is permitted or disallowed, as Westminster export constitutions did not seek to regulate this matter. And this explains also the variations in the decisions that have been taken by several Commonwealth countries on the constitutionality of the anti-defection provisions. Now, in Mauritius, we don't know. It is not certain that such measures, if ever we had introduced them, would pass the test of constitutionality. Again, because the court has never had to pronounce itself on the type of parliamentary democracy that Mauritius has imported. Madam Speaker, I think I also need to clarify one more thing. I can recall that Honorable Shakil Mohammed stating that members of the National Assembly to whom the proposed anti-defection provisions will apply will lose their seats in the event that they are removed from the party by the leader. Ce sera la dictature du leader. Let me clarify and let me say that this is not the case. In fact, such a member will lose his seat only if he chooses on his own to leave the party, and not if he is removed from the party. Madam Speaker, in regard to the mode of allocation of PR seats, now let me say I recall what Honorable Béranger stating that it will not cure the disproportionality between votes and seats. Madam Speaker, as I have explained very clearly in my speech on Friday last, and here we have a major difference. I agree. We have opted for this mode because it is simple, practical, easily understandable, and above all, it guarantees political stability. And as was rightly pointed out by the Deputy Prime Minister, we did not invent this method. It was one of the methods proposed by Sachs, namely Model A. And let me quote what Sachs had to say on this model, which admittedly was not his preferred model. But let me quote. This model would accordingly have strong advantages as far as simplicity and familiarity are concerned. It would also do little to disturb stability produced by the present system. Unquote. As I said, Madam Speaker, for us, stability and governability are sacrosanct, and we should not compromise on that. And let me say that, yes, true it is, I have been in government with Deputy Prime Minister, 2000-2005. I know his stand at that time. Again, we have been together. I know his opinion on this issue. We have had lengthy discussions. And I must say, we all moved. We all moved on that. And let me say one thing. I don't want to address to a particular party, but let me say one thing. We might not agree on certain things with regard to the proposal. But somebody said it, I think Honorable Boda, before. Qui peut plus, peut moins. At least it is one step in the right direction. Can you imagine, Madam Speaker, we have been discussing about proportional representation in this country for so many years. It has been a taboo subject also. There are at one time there are people who never even wanted to hear about proportional representation. But we are moving. We are moving some way. We are progressing, let me say, in terms of ideology, in terms of accepting certain things. And I would think that, okay, we might not agree with the system. We have our preferred system. But it would have, let's say, broken the ice. At least it would have been a first step. Then there would be eventually other governments also. They would come, they would probably try to improve on the system, depending, of course, on the political and the social context that we will be evolving then. But for me, I thought that there has been a consensus on our side. It was not easy, I must say. When you say that it took us 4 years, but it was not easy. But at least we have come within government. We have come with a consensus, and we have come with this bill in this House. Now, this issue of stability. I don't know if I can read properly from the proposal of the MMM and the Labour Party. I looked at it carefully, and I note that government stability for them at that time was equally very high on the electoral reform agenda. And let me quote from the Electoral Alliance Agreement. I quote, "The main features of the electoral reform agenda are to ensure government stability, to consolidate democracy, to enhance party fairness, to foster broad-based socio-demographic inclusion, and to promote fairer gender representation," unquote. So, Madam Speaker, for the Labour Party and the MMM, government stability took precedence over consolidation of democracy and enhancing party fairness. This is how I read it. Maybe there are other interpretations. And in the speech of the Honorable Paul Béranger, he also stated in regard to the allocation of the 6 additional seats that this does not exist. Yes, he said that this does not exist in any other country in the world. He said then that we are bringing a machin. This is the first country in the world that we are going to bring a new machin to this. But then I would ask a question. The best loser system, as far as I know, is a mechanism that is unique to Mauritius and does not, I have tried to check to see whether other countries have this system with the community defined in our constitution. I have not seen that anywhere else in the world. So just because additional seats have been devised by us and it suits our specific context, it doesn't mean to say that it is necessarily bad or unworkable. It is a Mauritian solution for the Mauritian context. Now, let me, and I have to come to this, Madam Speaker. It's good that I say something that has happened, because the Honorable Paul Béranger, of course, he is un érudit de l'histoire de l'île Maurice, l'histoire politique surtout de l'île Maurice. Et moi, je voudrais citer aussi une partie de l'histoire que j'ai vécue dans cette chambre en 2014. En 2014, il y a cause causée, we know. Donc, il y a le leader de l'opposition, d'alors, et puis le Premier ministre, le Dr Navin Ramgoolam, qui entame des causes causées qui durent pendant, je ne sais pas, assez longtemps, pour que le Parlement ne siège pas pendant 9 mois. Alors, mais ce qui est grave, Madame la Présidente, ce qui est grave, c'est que qu'est-ce qu'ils sont venus nous proposer? Il y avait ce problème de déclaration de communauté pour les candidats. Il fallait trouver une solution. Alors, on vient de l'avant avec the Constitution Declaration of Community Temporary Provisions Bill. Madam Speaker, I don't want to go into the depth of, what has happened and so on, because the government of the day then, and the blame is squarely on Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, then Prime Minister. He was working on a proposal for electoral reform for how many years? Never came, because we all know, it's a fact. He used this issue of electoral reform he used it as a bait. I use his own words, comme boîte, as a bait to attract the MMM into an alliance. Okay, fair enough. That was done. But and this is what I say, sometimes I am very disappointed, because I was a member of this house and I spoke on that bill. And let me also respond to an issue which was raised by the leader, by Honorable Béranger, because he said well, why is it that we have had consultations with the Electoral Supervisory Commission, with the Electoral Boundaries Commission? Well, we should have put their report, their views, tabled in Parliament during this debate. Madam Speaker, during the 2014 debate, I was making, and I will come to that in a few minutes, I was making a point that the community, with regard to the nomination of best loser, had already been predetermined. And there was an objection taken by, because I'm not going to repeat my argument, it's there for anybody to read and answer. And I was explaining to the House how it has been predetermined, and Honorable Béranger stood up and took a point of order. He said, and I quote, "Is it in order to say such things concerning an independent institution, the Electoral Commission, which are being broadcasted live, casting aspersions like that on the Electoral Commission, and expecting the Honorable Prime Minister supposedly to become the porte-parole of the same commission?" I put it to you and so on. And I was, yeah, Speaker ruled, yes. It's a shame, I must say. But j'étais têtu, Madam Speaker. J'étais têtu parce que I knew the point that I was making was the right one. And it was the right one. And I was stubborn. When I was stubborn, yeah, we'll do, but look what happened. I put it in the form of a question. And I was allowed by the Speaker then. And again, you make, Honorable Béranger stood up, point of order. Mr. Speaker, sir, can I take the same point? Because what was alleged, I mean, the Electoral Commission is no longer here, but they can't defend themselves. So why is it that those arguments that was taken in point of orders then, why is it that now it doesn't apply, and the Honorable Béranger is asking us now, put in the report. I have said, Madam Speaker, I don't want the views of the Electoral Supervisory Commission, the Electoral Boundaries Commission, to be the subject of debate and for all kinds of, I don't know what criticisms or whatever it is for this House. Now, let me come to the 2014. Madam Speaker, again, this is history. You know, we were in the opposition, obviously, and I was trying to understand what was the bill about, what they were trying to do. And I said, look, from my reading, ils sont en train de fausser the nomination of the best losers. Because we all know best losers, first past the post, the results, and then there is a mechanism that is a calculation that is done by the Electoral Supervisory Commission to nominate best losers. Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait, Madame la Présidente? Et ça, l'histoire is already on record. Ils ont déjà prédéterminé le nombre et les communautés qui vont être nommées comme best losers. Après cette loi. And I pointed out, initially, I thought I might not have understood this legislation well. And I pointed out that, look, with what you have been proposing, there will be two communities that will be left behind. They will not be able to be nominated. One would be the Sino-Mauritian community, and the other one would be the Hindu community. And you know what they did? They came up with an amendment, last minute, because I drew the attention. Then they realized, I'm no expert. I'm not expert in constitutional matters and so on. But with all their constitutional experts at that time, they found out that I was correct, and they came up with an amendment where it said that no candidate belonging to a community and so on and so on, the first additional seat required to be allocated shall be allocated to the most successful unwritten candidate belonging to that community, because the Sino-Mauritian would have been left out. And you know what happened, Madam Speaker, if there was not this amendment, if I didn't draw their attention? During the 2014 elections, no Sino-Mauritian was elected. And Alan Wong, fortunately because of this, Alan Wong was nominated best loser. This is a fact. But Madam Speaker, let me say another thing which really flabbergasted me. At that time, I could try to understand. I know MMM. They have always claimed to be a party avant-gardiste, fighting against communalism. They're trying to remove all these communal barriers and so on. Fair enough. Can you imagine, we voted this bill for the 2014 election, temporary provisions. We are, and the Honorable Béranger was so proud that he came along with that idea, removing shall and putting may, so that a candidate for the general election is not obliged, if he so chooses, not to declare his community. That was very good. Very good. I applauded. I said, and you know, Madam Speaker, if you look at my speech, I drew a number of flaws in that bill. But yet, the MSM, we said, we are going to vote for the bill. We voted for the bill, in favor of that bill. Because, as a party, we are fighting. We want communalism to regress. And we want, I hope there will come a day where a candidate who stands for general election does not have to declare his community. And I stood up in this house, I said, look, we vote for the bill, it is going to become act, and I am not going to declare my community when I'm going to register as a candidate. And you know what the Labour and the MMM did? They instructed all their candidates to declare their community when they stood as candidates. This is history, Madam Speaker. It's good to talk about so many things, but this is history, and therefore, you know, you have to face what you have done also. So, Madam Speaker, let me remind the House that the people are watching our political leaders, and I'm sure they will condemn any attempt at obstruction, especially so if it comes from a party who did build up a reputation in the past for its uncompromising stances on the theme of un seul le peuple, une seule nation. The people will not forgive any inconsistency on the matter as serious as electoral representation. Madam Speaker, as I stated earlier, this was a long-awaited bill. This is the first time since independence that a bill on electoral reform of this magnitude has been introduced in the National Assembly. First time. There have been all sorts of talks, but nobody has dared to walk the talk. This government has done its part. I was expecting members to rise above party politics and not to succumb to narrow-minded lobbying. I was expecting them to stand up for democracy, unity, and nationhood. It takes courage and determination to stand by your ideals and convictions. We have a rare opportunity to adopt an electoral reform that is fair, inclusive, and ensures stability, and that is fit for the 21st century. For me, it is a matter of deep regret and disappointment that the debates have so far failed to generate a consensus for the consolidation of our democracy. Madam Speaker, now that all have expressed their opinion, we know that for this bill to be passed, we need a three-quarter majority. We have 69 members in the National Assembly. Therefore, we need 52 members to vote in favor of the bill to get it through. On our side, we have 45 members. Therefore, we are short of 7. After having heard all the different parties represented in this House, it is clear that the PMSD, the MMM, the Labour Party, the Mouvement Patriotique, Honorable Ramano, and Honorable Selvon are not voting in favor of the bill. Therefore, it is clear that we would not reach the required number to get the bill adopted. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is that the Constitution Amendment Bill number 22 of 2018 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Public Bill Committee stage.
Madam Speaker, I move under Standing Order 55-2 that the committee stage of the Constitution Amendment Bill number 22 of 2018 be taken at a later sitting.
The question is that the next stage of the Constitution Amendment Bill number 22 of 2018 be taken at a later sitting. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. I suspend the sitting for half an hour.